Professor William Goetzmann, you have recently written a book, Money Changes Everything, How Finance Made Civilization Possible. One of the questions I wanted to ask you is you kind of go back through time, you go all the way back, and you talk about how finance has made everything happen in civilization. Do you correlate anything that's happened in the U.S. society with things you've seen from the past?
Oh, yeah, of course. We've had so much financial innovation in the last few decades that the ability for the ordinary person to invest is just a miracle. Since the growth of mutual funds over the last 4 or 5 decades, it's transformed that capacity for the family to provide for their future in a way they just really couldn't have done back in the early part of the 20th century. So I think the revolution in the movement towards first mutual funds, then ETFs, and then other kinds of financial products has just reduced the individual, the family level risk to an extraordinary extent. Those kind of innovations we saw earlier in history, but they're just much more accentuated now.
Absolutely. So, gentlemen, I think you'll get a kick out of this. I was telling my mother that I was coming out here to chat with the two of you, and she looks at me and goes, "Mark, honey, I've got some advice for you. Keep your mouth shut. Just learn from these guys." So Dr. Ibbotson, she's about your age. She's a wise woman. I just wanted to ask the two of you, our listeners are from Indiana, and I know, Dr. Ibbotson, you spent some time, got a bachelor's degree from Purdue, an MBA at IU, if I'm correct. So you're right. Familiar with my area. I'm sure you can relate to what my mom's saying. Best financial advice that either of you have had. Can you share that with my audience?
Well, the overall best financial advice, and it's something I've always advocated, is buy stocks for the long run. And I, of course, did that myself. Basically, I've invested in the stock market pretty much my whole life. And so I think it's the overall best financial advice for most people to try to have a big participation in the stock market and as early as possible. But I will say I don't want to just go all in, because actually for your mother, as you start getting closer to retirement and in retirement, you actually do need to take less risk in your portfolio, because that's when you actually face some longevity risk and so forth. You don't want to outlive your assets.
Yes.
And at a certain point in time, if you have especially as you approach the early years of retirement, if you have a big drop in the market, it can affect your whole retirement. So there are some really important crisis points here that you have to be careful about. And so generally, I'm all for equities, but in that critical stage, when you start approaching retirement, you need to take less risk. And I will say, the traditional way you did that was buying bonds, and that worked so great over the last several decades. But we now see that bonds are actually, I've known it all along, but it's coming, everybody sees it now, that bonds actually can drop in price quite a bit as interest rates rise.
They can. They've had a rough couple of years.
Yes.
Absolutely. Professor Goetzmann, how about you? Best financial advice?
Well, I would say, first thing, pay your bills.
Well said.
And, some basic financial hygiene is something, and know-how is something that everybody should have. So, I'm with Roger in that the investment early on in equities is something that yields great benefits as time goes on. So that's an important step. Another thing that most people don't think about is that something like a financial investment, a portfolio of financial assets, particularly in equities, typically beats an investment in your house. Most people think, a home is a great investment. The home has not been a great investment over the long term, and prices of houses go down as well as up. So, a home is a kind of with a mortgage and everything, it's kind of an enforced savings plan for the long term, but houses as an investment don't increase at the same rate of return as equities.
Fantastic. Okay, so you both gave great lectures today. Some parts of it hit on economy, some parts hit on annuities. And I know, Dr. Ibbotson, you and your team at Zebra Capital wrote an article about annuities, versus bonds and kind of 1927 to 2016. Can you share with my listeners what the summary of that was? And Professor Goetzmann, if you want to jump in as well with your view on that bonds and annuity story.
Well, the key is you have to take less risk as you approach retirement. For most of us have to take less risk, and bonds are actually pretty risky.
Yeah.
And annuity products that I was talking about were fixed index annuities, and these were products that were insured, so that you didn't lose money over, say, 2 or 3 year periods. That's what the insurance covered. So I guess the simple answer is that you need to supplement your many of us need to supplement our retirement plans with other ways of taking less risk, substitutes for bonds, and certainly annuities is one way of doing that.
Fantastic.
I have an interesting experience. I watched my parents in the 1980s in their retirement fund participate in put their savings into an index product that provided a floor.
Okay.
Which was a form of insurance, and they did very well. So I have at least some secondary experience at seeing good outcomes in my family with something that is a complex product, but it fit their worries about I don't want to lose below a certain level.
Perfect. Guys, last question for you, and this is sort of a shout out to my history. I grew up many times watching Back to the Future with my boys, and Professor Goetzmann, in your recent book, you talk about how money can be used like a time machine. Please explain if you can.
That's fantastic. Yeah. Wouldn't we all love to be able to go back with some cash and buy some Apple stock and stuff like that?
Sure.
But finance is a time machine because if you're a borrower, you take some money that you get money from the future. You get money actually that you don't have. It just appears. Where does it come from? Well, you have made a future promise. Okay, so any kind of financial transaction has this dimension of time. Well, let's see if you're the lender. Well, if you're the lender, you have some money today that you don't have that much use for, but you definitely need money in the future because let's say you're going to retire. So it's a way for you to put your money into a time machine and have it appear with extra interest in the future when you want to spend it. So that's the time machine that finance is.
Love it. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Yes.